The riches.
It was a sunny afternoon. The road cooked a lizard alive that was foolish enough to cross it. The heat from the black road was so intense it made the air warp and distort across the wind. A woman trudged across the road. Her clothes were filthy and stained with sweat. The soles of her sandals thinned and sizzled with each step, leaving a trail of molten residue. She picked up the lizard and ate it. The meat was rough, and the scales wedged themselves between the gaps of the teeth. She didn't mind it, though. The flavor was substantially better than the insects in the desert. Continuing to walk for hours, the sun's rays beat down on her skin, causing it to crack and bleed. A piece of paper danced through the wind and slapped the tired face. She grasped the paper and began reading. It was dirty with little smudges of red across it. It displayed 4 adults playing a board game, and in large bold letters it read, "Monopoly. Fun for the family and friends." She gently prodded her fingers across her lips. They were terribly cracked enough that even the poke of a finger would stain it in blood. Just as quickly the paper arrived, it was taken away by the wind. Upon trekking a few more miles, there was a sign up in the distance. It was a billboard sticking out like a sore thumb along the road. Only $23 for a gallon of water. 1 mile down the road, it stated. She licked her lips. The sight of the ad just worsened her thirst. Her slow, steady pace turned into a jog. She will have that water or die trying. She reached the end of the road and came across a large red circle drawn in sand, and in the middle was a little wooden store that looked more like a broken down shack. On the sign, there was just as the billboard prophesied, $23 for a gallon of water. She walks in the store. The shelves were loaded with cobwebs and dusty. The counter stood out as being the only clean thing about this place. On the upright corner, there were tiny holes and scratch marks. She rang the call bell. A robot clanked and chattered to the counter.
How may I help you?
He said while screwing in a bolt to his forearm. 2 gallons of water, please. Her voice was cracked and dry.
Coming right up.
It slammed the screw on the table, causing it to stand right up, and disappeared into the back room. He emerged with 2 blue gallons and placed them onto the counter.
That'll be 50 total.
He picked up the screw and resumed to adjust his arm. She pats herself down and pulls out her wallet. Only a few dollars. Look, I only have this much and I am very thirsty. Is there some other way I could pay you back? The robot jerked its head back and forth. How about if I... Sparks start flying from its arm, and it slowly begins to slump onto the counter. The smell of exhaust and burnt circuitry filled the air. The woman nudged the robot. No life. It was dead. She ripped a sticker off the cap and began guzzling it down. The water was sweet and cool and refreshing. The robot had a layer of rust. A majority of the wiring was severed. The computer hardware was protruding out of the body. Honestly, how is this thing even functioning? Began pouring water on it, which soon ignited it into flames, so that we don't have any mishaps. She grabbed both jugs and tottered out of the store. The jugs, they were heavy, and made it impossible to run at full speed. All she could do was sway them back and forth. Just a little bit further, a sharp pain jolted on her forearm, which made her drop the jug. She glanced down and saw a tiny hole below her left wrist. She looked back to a horrible realization. The robot, Blaze, was standing at the edge of the door, holding a smoking M24 rifle. It fired another shot. The bullet punched a hole through her right abdomen. She howled in pain and collapsed. The machine twitched and spasmed between each step. She dug her nails deep in the earth, panting and gasping. It is taking all her might just to crawl. It was coming. The clanking, the chattering grows louder. The fire made it look like a demon straight from hell, coming to claim its prize. If she could cross the line, then the robot will not get her. That is what they stated. No, she stuttered. A shadow loomed over her, and she feels the weight of a warm, metallic foot pushing down on her back. She is helpless. No, she shrieked. Then, with the sunshot, her head exploded in a million pieces of blood and gore. A year passed, and in a certain building, a man named Gregory was one of the show's dozens of ushers that guided people through the halls of a massively popular game show. What wouldn't you do for billions of dollars? The show has been on for as long as he could remember. As a child growing up in the early 2000s, he would watch it with his great-grandfather, who would constantly say things like,
Do not trust them, boy. They will tempt you, promise you riches. It is all lies that they will provide.
He wiggled his frail old finger at the screen with a scornful look on his face. The show's history, as told by his great-grandfather, Charles McJason, was rather interesting and strange. It appeared around WWX around 1947 when he was a boy, with offerings of thousands of dollars per show. People would easily flock on over just to enter it and earn the money, especially the desperate and the homeless. His own father came home straight from the war with a missing arm and couldn't find any work. So he entered the show one cold winter day and brought home $5,000 cash. But there was something different about him. He was sticky and smelled of something sweet. Even when Charles hugged his father goodbye before going to his day of school, the clothes would stick to his father's exposed skin, and with minimal effort, he would tear away from his loving grasp. Weeks ago, he was a vibrant and strong man that was built like a tank, but now he was so thin that his cheekbones stood out like mountain peaks. Even doing the most mundane task, like getting up from the bed, was taking all of his effort. Leaving his wife being the only one capable of working, her routine would consist of getting up at 5 a.m. to pry her husband out of bed, feed the boys, and work her 2 jobs from 8 a.m. in the bright morning to 9 p.m. at night. Every time she came home, her husband would look slightly worse than he did in the morning. One day, she woke up in the middle of the night, sleeping by herself. She searched through the rooms within her little shack and found a note written on the table. Dear Penelope, I'm sorry for putting you through this. I promise I will make it better for you. I am returning to the game show to earn more money. Love, McJason. It has been a month since then. She struggled with parenting by herself, and oftentimes her family members would come in to help take care of the boy. Upon returning from another long day of work, she noticed something odd about the handle. There was a sticky substance that oozed like syrup and emitted a decaying, foul odor. She ran her long, thin finger across the liquid and rubbed the substance between her index finger and thumb. Immediately they stuck together, and it took a Herculean effort to take them apart. That's when she realized that her husband was back. With a rag on the street, she grabbed the handle and cautiously opened the door. There was a long, slimy trail that went past the kitchen and up the empty, dark stairs. There was a whimpering that was coming from one of the kitchen corners. She lit a oil lamp and saw Charles, huddled into a ball with his head tucked between his knees. Charles, what happened?
A monster came and went up the stairs.
She looked into the staircase, covered with shadows.
Stay here. Mommy's going to see Daddy.
She quietly walked up the stairs while avoiding the trail of slime and went into the master bedroom. Immediately, there was a powerful, awful odor that made her gag, and a low wheezing sound that came from the bed. She hovered the oil lamp over the sheets and saw a sight that made her scream in horror. A mummified husk that was slimy from head to toe was stuck to the bed like a mouse caught in a sticky trap. Clenched tightly within its fist were bills of hundreds of dollars. That story would always give Gregory nightmares as a child. Sometimes it would keep him up at night until the break of dawn. His parents would often scold his great-grandfather and demand that he would stop telling Gregory those stories. But the older Gregory got, and the more great-grandfather talked about that day, the more Gregory felt that his grandfather was succumbing to old age. And now, here he was, working as an usher for the same company that turned some distant relative into a sticky monster. Gregory was recently hired on after his previous company laid him off, and he couldn't find any kind of work. The job was fairly easy. Make sure no one was cutting in front of anyone else, and to deal with troublemakers. The line itself stretched for a good mile, with eager people looking forward to getting their shot at winning big money. The show was fairly simple, just spin the wheel, and depending on how difficult the question would tie into how much money they could earn. There has been only one person in the show's history that won the amount of $1 billion, and that came in the form of a young man with well-groomed facial hair that reached to his chest. He had thick rimmed glasses, long wavy hair, and sported a kurta long tunic. The man's name was Imbond, and was a scholar studying oenology in the University of France. And just so conveniently, the question had to do with the subject of dreaming and the negative impact it could have on the subconscious. Not only did the man answer it right, but he went on an 8-minute lecture behind the mechanics and biological aspect that causes the dreams. With that, he gained instant celebrity status and became a household name in the study of that field during the late 1980s. For a full month, radio and television stations would mention the man's study, and he eventually landed in a job at some research center that studied dreams. It was a particularly chaotic morning because a overweight lady lost her place in line, and Gregory, along with 4 other people, had to calm her down. She threw a bottle that luckily missed them, and they pinned her down to the ground. Another time, a couple started to push and shove their way towards the front. Gregory found the work to be exhausting and went to go on a 15-minute break in a dimly lit room, which only had a table and a chair. He pulled out his phone, checking the prices on the stock market, swiped left and right on a couple dating sites until time was up, and he had to tend to the savage, angry people that made up the line. However, he opened the door to a hallway that was completely different from the one he navigated through to get back to his station. The walls and the floor were made of a fleshy substance with a strange slimy ooze that dripped from the ceiling and landed with a sickening splash.
What the shit is this?
He muttered. He slammed the door and opened it. It still was a strange hallway. He walked a couple steps out of the room and onto the fleshy floor. It squished underneath his weight and he recoiled in disgust. Gregory turned around and saw the room had completely vanished. So, he walked back to his station. Although the walls looked completely different, the way to get back to the line remained the same. He turned around the corner and bumped into a thin man so hard that they both landed on their backsides. Laminated papers flew all around them and landed in a disorganized mess.
Are you alright?
Gregory quickly got up on his feet and helped the man gather his papers. His hair and beard were colored snow white. Bags sagged underneath his tired, bloodshot red eyes.
Watch where you're going, asshole!
The stranger snapped at Gregory.
Jeez, man, no need to be a jerk about it.
He handed the papers to the tired man. They were all covered with that strange liquid that was oozing from the floor. If it wasn't for the lamination, the papers surely would have been ruined. The man wore a white lab coat that was heavily stained, a plain old jet black tie, and a name tag that read Imman Hisman.
Hey, you're that guy that won $1 billion. Oh, dude, you're a legend.
Am I really a legend?
He looked at Gregory with veins pulsing all over his pinkish eyes and a abnormally large smile.
Look what that's gotten me, what that's gotten all of us.
He waved his hands frantically in a circular motion that went wilder the louder he shouted, but then he abruptly stopped and extended a long index finger down the hallway that was dark and foreboding.
I am working like a goddamn slave for this place.
Wait, what are you talking about? Where are we?
We are in a damn nightmare escape, boy. Or as you would say, dude, with no hope of ever escaping.
His disgusting laugh-filled grin receded into a frown with tears welling up in his eyes, and he began crying.
What do you mean, nightmare escape?
Imbond continued to cry. Normally, Gregory would be more sympathetic towards a person, especially when they are crying, but this gloomy, slimy, squishy hallway made every hair on his head stand straight up.
Hey, get hold of yourself and explain.
I can't. All I know is that I'm living my worst fear right now, and you soon will too.
He continued to sob.
I have studied years of this stuff, but I don't know what is going on. What kind of a roll is this? Am I? If I don't know what is going on.
His sobbing turns into maniacal laughter as he sprints down the hallway until the darkness envelops him whole.
I have got to find my way out of here.
Gregory continued to walk down the hallway for a couple of hours until his feet was sore and had to stop for a quick break. Gregory wiped off the small sweat he worked up on his forehead. The sweat itself was sap-like and oozed down to the tip of his beak-like nose. His walk turned to days, with each passing hour growing ever stickier the more he sweat. Within the third day, the pits of his stomach rumbled. He was so hungry that the fleshy, pulsing wall started looking more appetizing with each passing second. The thought of eating raw meat would have disgusted him 3 days ago, but he was so thin that he was more of a bony skeleton than man. Gregory leaned forward with his jaw wide open and took a massive bite out of the fleshy wall. Using all his strength, he took a big chunk out of the wall. The meat was bitter and sour, the flavor growing ever fouler with each chew. He ate until he was full and continued on the dark, fleshy hallway. Eventually, Gregory's sweat was so thick that it had the viscosity of glue and made his feet stick to the floor. But that did not matter, for after days of wandering, he stumbled across a colossal seed-shaped machine that stood before him, with millions of skulls littered across the floor, and at the peak of the seed shot a brilliant, humming white light that penetrated through the meaty ceiling. The sight horrified him, but his legs forced his entire body to move towards the ominous seed, ignoring the swelling fear that grasped hold of the man. After a few more steps, he could not move. He grabbed his right leg, and using all his might, he ripped the foot from the floor. The force threw Gregory off balance, and he fell face first, right next to a fleshy, decomposing body. It was Imbond. Eyes rolled back, and a open mouth that let out a noiseless scream of agony. And he had the same lab coat that was filthy with dirt and grime. Gregory tried to get up, but the glue-like sweat bonded him to the floor. He was stuck and unable to move. All Gregory could do was scream onto the field of skulls and stare at the dead body. The beam of light emitting from the seed shot towards the sky and into a ship that resided in the depths of space. Two large, brain-like monsters sat at the control panel in their misshapen colossal ship. They were scanning meticulously and with such caution that there was no room for error. One of them turned towards the other one and asked,
How is the process, Striker?
The fear engine is charged at 99%. It took nearly a century to accumulate enough fear and death to convert into a power source, but we almost got it. Status report on the human dragon.
The illusion seed has gotten another one. The human named Gregory secured. Give it a couple more hours and he should be dead. How many has the illusion seed attracted so far?
Since 1947 to 2030, about 50 million, with 2 escaping, but they always returned. However, the human named Jason was able to break away twice and not return since. My readings show him to be dead around a day after he escaped the second time.
Yes, we are very lucky that the illusion seed has such a powerful influence on his mind to silence him. We must be careful towards our next destination. Where are we setting course to?
Schrager looked at his misshapen comrade with an ominous glare.
Earth.
Hey guys, thank you for listening to my project, and I really appreciate that you took the time and effort just to listen to me. And be sure to subscribe to my channel so you know all that story goodness I'm going to bring out. And be sure to, have a good day. As always, stay cool.